Washington State adds something to the school curriculum. We are at a moment right now where there are book bans and attempts to erase history all around the country. Everybody in states like Florida and Texas and other places, particularly the South, are trying to dismantle what we know as an educational curriculum, as a multicultural educational curriculum. Well, what's happening now at the same time is that states like Washington are pushing back. They just passed something called Senate Bill 5462. Now, Senate Bill 5462 mandates uh, that public schools have an LGBTQ curriculum. All schools in the state of Washington are required to have an LGBTQ curriculum. And this is not the first state to do this. In fact, Washington becomes the seventh state that requires LGBTQ curricula inside of public schools. Now, previous bills in Washington that called for diversity. They said that we need to have the perspective of some groups, enslaved Africans, tribal communities, but they never specifically required LGBTQ history lessons. Now, according to Washington State Senate Democrats, inclusive learning is important to them. The LGBTQ community needs to be acknowledged. They need to have their voices heard. There's no doubt about that. But they also say that having inclusive learning curriculum also impacts students' mental health. It improves the grades, it improves the attendance, it improves the graduation rates of marginalized communities. This is going to start not October of 2024, but October of 2025. So not next school year, but the following school year, they'll have a new LGBTQ curriculum in place. Now, I know this is going to get some people upset. This is going to get some people riled up. And the reason is they're going to say, why do we need gay curriculum? Why do we need an LGBTQ curriculum right now? And the truth is, we do. And the reason why we need it is because we need everybody's voice involved. We need everybody's story involved. It's not enough to simply include LGBTQ people in history. There's lots of gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender folk in history, whether you name them or not. So we've always had LGBTQ people in our curriculum. But what does it mean to talk about Martin Luther King Jr. and the March on Washington and mention Bayard Rustin, who was a key architect of the March on Washington, but ignore the fact that he identified as same gender loving? Now, some people say, well, what does that have to do with it? Him being queer had nothing to do with him, being an architect of the March on Washington or being a great organizer. That's easy for you to say if you're not gay. It's easy for you to say if you don't identify as queer. It's easy for you to say if you don't identify as lesbian. But if you have to go through your entire life, if you have to go through your entire school life, your entire curricular life, your entire educational experience, not knowing that anybody that looks like you or believes like you or loves like you or appears like you did things or contributed to our history, then you grow up thinking that you have nothing to offer history. So can you imagine going through your entire life as a disabled person and not knowing that we had one of the most consequential presidents in American history, Roosevelt, who was in a wheelchair? Knowing that might matter. Knowing that might matter for you as the student in the wheelchair. Knowing as a Black person growing up in school, a lot of times all we got was Black History Month. We got Frederick Douglass, Martin Luther King Jr., and maybe Harriet Tubman. But by knowing that Black people contributed to history, not just getting ourselves free, but we were everything from Benjamin Banneker, right, to Charles Drew, like knowing that mattered to Black people. But let's be very clear. It's when you include the experience of marginalized groups, you don't just do a favor to the marginalized groups. You also humanize the entire community. It's important for me to know that people who are disabled contributed something to the world. Because as I grow up, if I'm growing up in an ableist society, not knowing that shifts how I think about things. I start to think and buy into ableist logics to think that people in wheelchairs can't do anything, or people who are blind can't do things, right? People who are deaf can't do things. No, we got to reimagine that. In a white supremacist world, it's important for white people to know that Black people are the mothers and fathers of civilization, that we created traffic lights, that we created open heart surgery and blood transfusions and all that kind of stuff. We need to know this. They need to know this. Some of you are out there thinking, well, But why we got to bring sexuality into it? Look, this isn't about teaching kids how to be gay. Some of y'all act like these mentioning that people are gay will make you gay. It doesn't work that way. Mentioning it makes us in a more inclusive and loving and fair and just community. And that's why we're here in schools, to create more fair and just realities outside of schools. And so I'm all for this curriculum. Now, that's not all we need. We need a true history of Black folk in this country. We need a true history of the labor movement in this country in the curriculum. We need financial literacy in our curriculum. There's no reason people should graduate from high school and still not know how to open a bank account, still not know what to do with their money. I mean, I had graduated high school and didn't understand not to go to a check cashing place, right? We're vulnerable to predatory lenders. We need financial literacy. We need all kinds of stuff, but LGBTQ stuff has to be in the mix as well.